Phil, you're a clinical geneticist. I'm not sure if I should say it's a dying breed, but it's a rare breed.
Well, thanks a lot.
I haven't read your genome, but you've been a keen observer of the personal genomic space and this direct-to-consumer revolution, if you will. Are you as bullish as some of the people we've heard on the panel?
Well, I've spent the last three decades of my life thinking about how to bring genetic information into healthcare. A few things I'm sure of, but most things I'm not sure of. I'm sure that teenage boys are far more interested in phenotype than genotype when it comes to daughters. I have no doubt about that. I would make a few observations in response to what has been a tremendously exciting experience for me to hear about Cliff's work, and I've followed that and similar work elsewhere. I think everything in life is a matter of timing. You pointed that out. I have no doubt that genetic information is going to penetrate medicine in many ways. I have grave doubts about who's right about the time frame. In the short term, I don't see it penetrating primary care medicine very well. Let me make a few points. In the time that I've been involved in medicine, the number of genetic counselors available in the United States has barely moved. We have, roughly speaking, at any one time, 1,000 people in the United States who are formally trained as genetic counselors. I'm boarded in internal medicine and clinical genetics. Last time I checked, there were 200 such people in the United States. Very few internists, even high-quality individuals, are competent to deal with the kinds of information that are being generated by these exciting new companies. There are regulatory issues. For example, in the state of New York, it might be very difficult to work with some of this information and provide it direct to consumer. I think those regulatory issues will increase rather than decrease. A gentleman who was speaking during the question and answer period raised a point that I would re-emphasize. The genotype-phenotype correlation is a horrible problem. I think we do a terrible job phenotyping. Look at something like my own experience with autism that I've been deeply involved with for the last 20 years. In that short period, the diagnosis of autism has risen between 10 and 20-fold in the United States. There's a 10x variation between countries on the diagnosis of the disease. It's often driven by whether or not by writing a note a physician could get health care services for a child with developmental disabilities. We know essentially, as far as I'm concerned, nothing about either the phenotype or the pathophysiology of autism. Yes, there are a few very well-documented cohorts. I agree with that. But by and large, the autism story, arguably a disorder driven fairly substantially by genetics, is still extremely messy. I think we're going to have a very difficult problem at very low cost translating this information in a way that makes meaningful differences in people's lives. The question I have been most often asked, as somebody who is very pro this information, is so what? If you can't give the individual a meaningful, low-cost way to respond positively to knowledge, I don't think it's going to fly. I think we're going to get there, but I think it's going to be a lot longer than people may be inferring from some of the talks they hear.
Cliff, you mentioned a couple of times, I mean, clearly you want to make money. You have to make money to stay in business. So it's not clear to me where the consumer genomics market fits in on your list of priorities versus engaging with genome centers, big pharma companies, and so on. Tell us a bit more about your thinking as to when or how you might offer whole genome sequencing, perhaps in concert with some of the people here on the panel.
Well, these are the leaders in consumer genomics, and we want to be their back office. We want to wholesale complete human genomes to them at such a low price that it opens up the market for them. But they are going to need to provide that genetic counseling, that interpretation information, which is actually going to dwarf the cost of actually generating the data. We'll be generating the data for hundreds or thousands, and I would imagine the interpretation services of detailed experts spending many hours of their time, that's going to measure probably in the tens of thousands of dollars of interpreting the genomes. So I basically agree here that the time constant on this is going to be a long time, and this one case is not gated by the data set. Getting consumer genomics is gated first by understanding what's going on in that data set, and then by the cultural and regulatory issues, which are well beyond my time frame. And I'm struck in time frame that Dietrich refers to short term as 10 or 20 years, and I refer to long term as 7. So I still haven't quite switched over yet to this biotech world. I'm still kind of a